On this election day, we are watching a number of key races, including the governor's race and the U.S. Senate race.
Four Democratic candidates for governor are hoping to come out on top. The two biggest contenders are former Governor Charlie Crist and Agriculture Commissioner Nikki Fried. Whoever wins tonight will face Governor Ron DeSantis in the general election in November.
Voters will also decide today who will go up against U.S. Senator Marco Rubio this November. Congresswoman Val Demings is the heavy favorite to become the Democratic nominee because she's the only major candidate on the Democratic side. Senator Rubio is running unopposed.
Our co-anchor Todd McDermott joining us in the studio with some expert insight on the importance of tonight's primary election. Todd?
Because we brought in two experts, continuing our commitment to 2022 coverage. The polls aren't closed yet, of course, so we'll take a look first at the all-important primary that Democrats are watching to pick a candidate to run for governor. Let me bring in our exclusive political analysts, Ron Klein and Adam Hasner. Ron, let me start with you. The fact that the incumbent governor, Ron DeSantis, looks strong going into the general election, whether it's Congressman and former Governor Crist or Agriculture Commissioner Fried, either Democrat has a tough race ahead.
Well, I think that it is going to be a challenging race. He has a lot of money. He governs like he's winning the polls by 25%, and he's governing from the far right. So I think there's a big part of Florida that, number one, is Democrat, and number two is a lot of independent voters. So I think someone who's more middle of the road, Charlie Crist or even Nikki Fried, would, I think, probably be someone who can appeal to the middle, which I think is very important.
All right, let me play devil's advocate. Adam, Governor DeSantis has a massive campaign war chest. He's solidified his hold on the Republican base. Does he have possible vulnerabilities depending on who he's running against starting tomorrow?
Well, I think either candidate's going to put up a strong fight, but you mentioned the fact that he's raised nearly $150 million already. Both Democratic candidates are draining their war chests and are going to start tomorrow with nothing in the bank, and they don't have a lot of time to start raising that money. And so I think Governor DeSantis is just going to continue to do the things that he's been doing, getting his message out, traveling around the state. And it's going to be, I think, his opportunity to show that Florida is trending red. Trump won by a little bit more in 2020 than he did in 2016. And I think DeSantis wants to build on that to show that he has turned Florida red.
All right. And Ron, what issues will be front and center for Florida's 4 million independent voters in this race?
Well, I think they're the same issues that most people have, and they want access to health care. Seniors care about that. They want to make sure that streets are safe. They want to make sure that there's right to individual choice for women on things like abortion. They want reasonable gun laws, things that the Republican administration in Florida and Governor DeSantis in particular has really taken out to the right. So again, independents are like anybody else. They care about their families. They care about their personal individual rights. And I think those things will be front and center in this election.
Adam, let me just ask you the same question. Key issues for independents when it comes to this governor's race as it's shaping up.
Yeah, I don't think it's changed much. I know Ron's talking about some issues that he wants the Democrats or he wants it to be about, but this is going to be about what's the economy doing? What are prices doing? Inflation continues to rise. People continue to struggle. And then you have the other issues of crime and the border. And I think Ron DeSantis has demonstrated his leadership on these issues. And more importantly, I think he's started to flex his muscle a little bit. And I think what he's been able to do in terms of bringing independence over, particularly how he governed during COVID, I think a lot more people like it than didn't like it.
Interesting. It's the first time we've mentioned COVID in this discussion because it started so long ago. Finally, let's go to the other major statewide race. Even though there's no real drama tonight in the primary, two-term Senator Marco Rubio expected to face Congresswoman Val Demings in the general election after tonight. Ron, how do you see that race shaping up?
I think it's going to be a very good race. I think Val Demings is a very credible candidate. She's a former police chief, excellent member of Congress, speaks well, understands the issues, appeals to not only Democrats, but Floridians at large. Although the Republicans do the usual thing, oh, Democrats are liberal, she's not. She's a law and order person, and I think she will make a very strong case against Rubio.
All right, and Adam, is Florida's now senior U.S. Senator beatable?
I don't think so. And I think Ron would be right, but for the fact that Val Demings, when everyone on the Democratic side was talking about defund the police, she was silent. She acquiesced to those calls. And I think that's why all law enforcement is supporting Rubio. It is going to be a much closer race than people expect. Val Demings is very well funded. She's outraised Marco Rubio, which I think a lot of people find surprising. So she is a strong candidate, but she has a lot of vulnerabilities, and I certainly expect while it'll be a close race, I certainly expect Marco to be successful in November.
Ron, last 10 seconds. Val Demings in favor of defunding the police?
No, she's not. She is a police officer. She was a leader of police, and she understands, and people understand, that she's a very serious law and order person and very respectful of not only law enforcement, but the population that they serve.
Time's up, gentlemen. There's a lot more to come. Remember, polls in most of Florida close at 7 o'clock tonight, except in the Panhandle. We'll have you covered up until they close. Plus, both of our political experts will join us tonight to break down the key primary results on WPBF 25 News at 11. Ron, Adam, thank you.